liberty. The modest Five Forks School of Bartow County was mastered by the deacon Nathan Dowy, where 27 boys of Cartersville were molded more by fear than teacher's skill. To boys, the man was stout, as if his bones were carved and chiseled out of Scottish stones. His charming brogue, like undulating hills, could roll to thunder to impose his will. When ice-blue eyes would reach a frigid pitch, he'd bang his fists or swing that rigid switch. But Dowy knew enforcing every rule was futile on the final day of school. But Dowy's favorite boys to reprimand by either whipping switch or striking hand earned no abatement and did not receive a slack in strictness or a rule reprieve. The boys that met this lower category were scruffy twins named Tom and Terence Morey. Yet Deacon Dowy had a special fancy to always aim his muzzle right at Clancy. But Clancy, Macree, and those Morey twins were guilty not of any grievous sins. They were as mischievous and bristly as any other boys in history. Dowy said, "Since summer's all you crave, select a subject to study. Just behave." The boys were pasture colts released of reins, allowed to roam the room on longer chains. The subject Terence Morey chose was sleep. His hat went to his nose, he propped his feet, with toes like turnips unearthed from the land, and black as patina on a frying pan. Thomas pushed those bare feet off the desk, scolding his brother. "Don't put him to the test. He's easing up on them, but not on us." The man stood over them. "What's all the fuss?" Suddenly the student's speaking stopped. No pages rustled, not a squeak of chalk. It was as if the air had left the room, and every eye looked on as judgment loomed. Clancy answered, no fuss at all. They had a tiff like Barnabas and Paul, but like you teached on Sunday, they made up." "Unless you want the whip, you boys shape up." Though Dowy marched as if to get the whip, he only grabbed his teacher's chair to sit. And since he didn't go untie the tether, no one that day would feel the bite of leather. Thomas wedged the window near his desk to welcome in the breeze to cool their necks. They fanned their hats to stir the stagnant air and raked their fingers through their sweaty hair. Though Clancy waved for an exhaustive minute, the mugginess had no relief within it. He stopped the fanning to assess his hat, thumbing the chestnut pelt that matted flat. But he would never scratch away the stains of sweat that only honest work attains. He'd sooner wear it ripped and rimmed with grime than lose those badges earned from toil and time. Then he recalled what Blaine McShay once said. "That mama-made dish rag on your head looks like a skillet lid, all big and round. Them kind of hats ain't welcome here in town." He shook his head and let his eyes explore the store-bought hats the wealthy town boys wore. Plush ivy caps. He gave a quiet sigh and placed his tatty hat back on with pride. Though Clancy loved his hat, there was one better. But such a hat was made for colder weather, constructed from the skins of a raccoon, the hat worn by his hero, Daniel Boone. Each second, longer than the one before, was stubborn syrup that refused to pour, preventing Clancy from his summer joy. He thought, had boredom ever killed a boy? What made it all the worse, which Dowy knew, was the parole of his selected few. "McShay, the Sullivans, and Walsh, up front." These boys had never met with Dowy's brunt, so every student knew they weren't named to get the whip or to be stripped to shame. "You lads have earned an early leave today." Clancy thought, earned by Daddy's pay. Behind him, Clancy heard the shuffling of closing desks and papers ruffling. Then heavy stomping steps from up the row were drummed with striking heels and thumping toes. Suddenly his hat was on the floor, knocked off the desk, a common act of war by Blaine McShay as he went strutting past. This may as well have been a rifle's blast. A rage flared up in Clancy like a fire that lit the kindling of his every fiber. But Clancy knew that Doughty's watchful eye would love to see him make a fierce reply. The ready switch that hung in silent poise was hopeful for the use that it enjoyed. So Clancy snatched his hat from off the ground, not shooting a retaliating round. Both Doughty and the whip were disappointed to see the could-be trap had been avoided. The boys that Clancy and the Moreys hated first sneered and smirked, then left, emancipated. As time dragged on throughout that endless day, Clancy envisioned wading in the shade and cooling waters of their swimming hole. The Etowah was calling to his soul. He thumped his hat on Thomas Morey's thigh, and Thomas looked with eyes that wondered why. Clancy used his hat to shield a question. Etowah. Alluring, fine suggestion. Since there was no resisting this device, Thomas whispered back, "Sounds mighty nice." This verbal contract, one they couldn't break, was just as binding as a spit and shake. But Clancy's conscience voiced a solemn warning to not forsake his promise made that morning. "We gotta hurry, though. Pa said that haul is heavy. By hisself can't get it all." Thomas agreed. "Us too. So just a dip." Then Terence warned, "You're wise to make it quick. I wouldn't want to see your daddy's face if y'all is late again to the marketplace." The Moreys' comments made Macree imagine his father, alone, loading up the wagon, and then arriving at the market late, getting a distant lot, a dreadful fate. He saw his father's sadness and regret, another Saturday of needs unmet. Although he knew his father needed him, Clancy's present need was for a swim. As other students seeking a reward were doing math with chalk upon the board, Macree had an equation of his own: to swim plus being timely getting home. When Doughty pulled his watch out of his vest, he watched the ticking hands in sheer arrest before he gave a nodding indication to his assistant, lovely Millie Macon. Miss Millie's blonde and bouncing perfumed hair was flirting with the afternoon's warm air. The older boys indulged in her parade, while Clancy longed for the school bell's serenade. To hear her leather soles on wooden planks began the music. Clancy's heart gave thanks. Her steps went down the hall, out to the bell. She grabbed its braided rope and rang it well. The clanging brass, an unmistakable sound, notified the folks within the town that quiet streets would soon be occupied with raucous sons, like prisoners untied. For those kept in the school's captivity, that dinging bell proclaimed their liberty. No other inmates there felt quite as free as did the Morey twins and Clancy Macree.